The story begins long ago, with a man haunted by a bitter memory. He recalls a terrible mistake, letting a person he scornfully called a rat escape across the continent. Standing alone in a dark, shadowed room, he is consumed by this past failure. This runaway wasn't just some random enemy, they were a traitor. The man's anger burns as he remembers this person single-handedly destroying his family and being the one responsible for his father's tragic end. Across a long table, a subordinate confirms that the Marquis is deeply interested in a specific safe. Leaning forward with cold intensity, the Marquis listens as the man reveals the code, safe number 5555. But there's a problem. Another man, lounging with a glass of wine, casually asks if the Marquis has found the key to that safe yet. The unspoken answer hangs in the air, a critical piece of the puzzle still missing. Marquis Reinhardt's subordinate presents a lead, suggesting the president of Pelp Bank holds the key. But he quickly corrects himself. Just as he sinks into this thought, the story takes an unexpected turn. Elsewhere, Seo-ah, having overheard a vital detail, urgently asks her companion to repeat the safe number she just mentioned. A new player has entered the game. A legendary key exists, one capable of opening a safe that has remained sealed for 25 long years. Seo-ah clutches a small pouch, her mind completely focused on the vital code she just learned. Number 5555. For decades, this key has been the subject of a relentless, worldwide search, but it was never found. Meanwhile, Marquis Reinhardt's expression darkens. He believes he knows who is connected to this mystery, his thoughts consumed by the one person he can never forgive, that woman. Marquis Reinhardt's mind races, demanding to know this woman's name and her goal. For years, the world searched for this legendary key, and now it has appeared in the hands of a mysterious outsider. Seo-ah waits anxiously, her hands clasped as she wonders when he will arrive. But a cold shadow has already fallen over her. Unseen, Marquis Reinhardt approaches from behind, his expression like ice. He looks down on the small woman standing before him, her very existence a nuisance. To him, her anxious question is utterly meaningless. A flicker of pure disdain flashes in his sharp, purple eyes as he closes the distance between them, his authority radiating through the silent hall. Marquis Reinhardt is trapped in a bitter memory, his thoughts a whirlwind of regret. He laments that if he had only known, things would be different. He never dreamed that a woman's so-called repentance would twist him into this cold, ruthless man. Snapping back to reality, a chilling smirk appears as he looms over Seo-ah. To him, her quest for atonement isn't noble, it's a painful reminder of the past. He sees the ghost of another woman in her, and he's ready to unleash all his resentment. We flash back to Seo-ah's childhood in a bustling port town, a place filled with exotic people from distant lands. But for young Seo-ah, it was a lonely world. Behind her back, servants would whisper about her Western features, her pale skin and brown hair. They gossiped that she was the product of a shameful affair. When her own mother found her listening, she offered no kindness. Instead, she coldly ordered Seo-ah to stay hidden from sight, leaving her small daughter alone in the shadows of their home, a prisoner of her own birth. Young Seo-ah understood the whispers and the cold stares that followed her. She was a child living in the shadows, always looking at the floor. But one day, a gentle hand lifted her chin. Her grandfather led her out of the darkness and into the brilliant sun. For the first time, she saw the wide blue sea. He looked at her and declared that she was his daughter. Even if it wasn't true, she clung to those words, the only kindness she had ever known. Then, he mentioned he had someone important for her to meet. Her grandfather's kindness, born from pity, brought a teacher into her life. For the first time, Seo-ah's small world of 2 rooms and a hall began to expand. She had a glimmer of hope, but that brief light was stolen from her. Time marched on, and the only man who ever showed her warmth passed away. Once again, she was completely alone, kneeling in despair. Just as her world plunged back into darkness, a voice called her name. A hand gently touched her shoulder, and she looked up, startled. The teacher became Seo-ah's only true friend, a kind presence in a world that chose to ignore her. For a moment, she believed she could live a peaceful life as the daughter of a respected man. But that fragile hope was shattered in an instant. One night, panic shouts echoed through the streets as a massive fire roared to life, engulfing her teacher's house in flames. Amid the chaos and ruin, Seo-ah found her mentor. She could only hold her teacher close one last time, her world once again consumed by darkness. With her last breaths, the teacher asked if Seo-ah was leaving. Crying, Seo-ah confirmed she had to cross the sea. The foreigner who caused this destruction was looking for her. The teacher grabbed her, delivering a final, urgent warning. Another man, cold as a blade, was also hunting the foreigner. Both men were desperately searching for a key, the very key in Seo-ah's possession. She was warned not to trust this second man either. Instead, she must go to the Royal Felt Bank and prove she is the key's rightful owner. With her last breath, the teacher delivered a final, chilling warning. The wolf is coming. Her hand went limp, leaving Seo-ah completely alone once more. Seo-ah clutched her mentor's body, her desperate pleas for her to wake up swallowed by the roaring fire. The scene cuts away to a cold, modern setting. A man in a sharp suit stands over the grim aftermath of a one-sided fight. Crushing something beneath his shoe, he coolly asks his fallen enemy if they truly believed they could succeed against him. The man with cold purple eyes, Marquis Reinhardt, taunts his defeated enemies, asking if they'd still have come if they knew this would be the outcome. His subordinate, Simon, reports that 2 were captured alive. Reinhardt calmly orders him to bury the others and make the survivors reveal who sent them. Despite the violent interruption, the Marquis declares he has a promise to keep. As his carriage travels onward, he scoffs at the pathetic attack, knowing exactly who is behind the predictable plot, the King of Luxon. Marquis Reinhardt rode in his carriage, convinced this conflict would only end when someone was permanently removed from the board. He arrived at the imposing Amonrose mansion, noting its closed-off, secretive air. Inside, Grand Duke Baden was preoccupied with a female companion and irritated by the noise outside his door. Reinhardt brushed past the staff trying to stop him, his voice cold as he gave a single command. Open it. The doors burst inward. The Grand Duke panicked, his mind screaming that the assassination attempt had failed. He thought of the man he answered to, the ruthless industrialist Oscar von Reinhardt, who had given him power in exchange for information. As the Duke tried to save face, the Marquis took a sip of wine. He calmly revealed that the Duke's secretary had already delivered some interesting news, proving he was 2 steps ahead of the entire pathetic plot. Marquis Reinhardt stated he was curious, sending the Duke into a panic. The Duke desperately hoped the Marquis couldn't have heard the bank president's report about the vault he was watching. Reinhardt toyed with him, pretending to forget the vault number before revealing he knew it exactly. 5555. As the Duke froze in shock, a flashback shows Seo-ah just 2 hours prior. She nervously asked a bank employee to confirm the vault number for a key she possessed. The employee told her it was number 5555, unknowingly connecting her to the entire plot. At the bank, an employee nervously inspects the mysterious key. A man with a magnifying glass sweats as he confirms the serial numbers on the key and the documents are a perfect match. The staff starts to panic. The manager orders them to proceed with verification, but there's a massive problem. Her identification papers are written in a language none of them can read. The Royal Bank only serves the absolute elite, leaving everyone wondering how this random woman in a tattered coat could possibly possess a key to one of their exclusive vaults. The bank manager scoffs, convinced the key is a sophisticated forgery. That vault hasn't been touched in 25 years. He trusts their authentication process to expose the fraud. An employee then rushes in with the results. After a moment of tense silence, the verdict is in. The key is authentic. Elsewhere, Seo-ah overhears people whispering about her being a foreigner and anxiously tugs at her hot collar. Just then, a bank staffer approaches, bows, and confirms that her key's authenticity has been verified. Seo-ah freezes, completely stunned by the news. With the key's authenticity confirmed, the bank employee's entire attitude changes. She apologizes for the poor reception and respectfully returns the key to Seo-ah. The staffer explains that since the vault's original owner hasn't shown up in over 20 years, ownership rights can be transferred to the key holder. Hope flickers in Seo-ah's eyes as she asks if she can open it now. But there's another catch. They still need to verify her foreign ID. Until then, she's only the temporary owner, and the vault remains locked. The bank employee apologizes for misremembering Seo-ah's home country and hands her an official certificate recognizing her as the key holder. But as Seo-ah accepts the document, a sudden, intense chill runs through her. She feels a pair of eyes locked on her, sensing a dark presence watching from the shadows. The staffer explains that translating her ID will take time and dismisses her for the day. Alone with her thoughts, a grim warning from the past echoes in her mind. The moment the key's existence is known, her life will become incredibly fragile. The threat is now real. Back in the VIP room, the bank staff is completely baffled. One moment Seo-ah was there, the next she's vanished without a single sound. They realize with a jolt that she's somehow slipped past their airtight security to get in and out. Meanwhile, Seo-ah is already outside, desperately running through the snowy streets. She hails a passing carriage, but the hooded driver gives her the creeps, warning her about being alone so late. Unfazed, she demands he take her to the busiest inn. The carriage driver flashes a shady smile, promising to get Seo-ah to her destination safely. Meanwhile, Word about the mysterious owner of the key is already spreading. An informant grins, confident that this is exactly the kind of news a certain arrogant man would be interested in. That man is the powerful Marquis Reinhardt, who casually asks his aide, Simon, if there's anything new from Phelp Bank. Simon confirms he has the crucial intel, privately gloating that this explosive information will finally be enough to shatter the Marquis's unshakable confidence. Marquis Reinhardt coldly asks Grand Duke Baden about Phelp Bank one last time. Trembling, the Grand Duke reveals that a mysterious woman appeared, holding the exact key the Marquis has been searching for. He adds that her identification was completely untranslatable. The instant the Marquis hears the word woman, his composure breaks. A furious purple light glows in his eyes as he crushes his cigarette. Lunging forward, he grabs the terrified Duke by his robe, demanding to know when he can finally access the vault. The Marquis coldly tells the Grand Duke that if he were capable, this would have been solved long ago. Without warning, he slams the Duke to the ground, pinning the man's face under his boot. He scoffs at the Duke's weak protests, reminding him that his one job was to open the vault. The Marquis reveals the true betrayal. He installed the Duke as bank president to spy on the royals. Now that the true key has surfaced, the Duke is completely worthless. With a chilling order to stay out of his sight, the Marquis turns his back, leaving the man collapsed on the floor. As he walks away with Simon, he asks for an update. Simon confirms they are tracking the key's owner. The Marquis recalls the grueling years he spent desperately searching for it, an ironic smirk spreading across his face as he declares the whole situation hilarious. With a chilling smile, Marquis Reinhardt demanded to know the woman's current location. At that very moment, a weary Han Seo-ah arrived at what she was told was the busiest inn in town. A welcoming innkeeper greeted her, and Seo-ah simply asked for a room for the night. The woman's smile widened as she claimed a room had just opened up. But as she led Seo-ah down the hall, her friendly face twisted into a sinister grin. The door opened to reveal shadowy figures, and Seo-ah instantly knew she'd walked into a trap. In a cold carriage, Marquis Reinhardt's mind drifts back in time. Long ago, he was hunting a man who fled across the continent. Reports claimed the target was captured, only to escape before the ship carrying him sank. He was officially presumed dead, but the Marquis never believed it. He demanded clear, undeniable evidence. Circumstantial reports meant nothing to him. This was deeply personal, as he was hunting the very traitor responsible for his father's tragic end. He needed to see it for himself. The owner of the vault was a man codenamed Peter, once a top agent for the Reinhardt family. He knew better than anyone how his former comrades dealt with traitors. Inside that vault is proof of his betrayal, a secret document exchanged with Luxon's old king, and a hefty sum of cash. He knows he must be the one to open it and end this destructive cycle. His mind flashes back to a painful memory, his mother desperately pleading with his father. She questioned why a Reinhardt had to fight the royal family's war. From the shadows, a young Reinhardt watched, his heart filled with confusion. If only his father hadn't perished on that battlefield alongside all of his most loyal men. The Marquis's thoughts drift to a painful past. His own mother, the Marchioness, was the only one who could have saved the family. But she acted like someone who had been waiting for her husband to pass. When he was just 6, she abandoned her clueless child, leaving him as the heir to a ruined house. If she hadn't left, he wouldn't have spent years fixated on that vault. As his carriage nears its destination, a cunning look crosses his face. He wonders if the strange woman who broke through his network is the living key he needs. In a pristine white room, the sound of running water echoes. Han Seo-ah begins her morning ritual, her movements quiet and practiced. She carefully ties her long brown hair back with a striking red ribbon before wrapping a simple white cloth around her body. After slipping into a modest robe, she walks towards the window. Her gaze falls upon the heavy drapes blocking the morning light. She notes with a quiet resignation that the curtains are, as always, drawn tightly shut, sealing her off from the world outside. The door is locked, and all her luggage is here. A wave of relief washes over her as she collapses onto the bed, completely exhausted. Compared to her past, where she was constantly walking on thin ice, this simple room feels like a fleeting paradise. She remembers being so scared that even eating was a struggle. Clutching a small pouch to her chest, she quietly wonders if her master would think she is doing okay, vowing to carve his advice into her heart. As Seo-ah drifts off, she hopes her caution has finally earned her some peace. But just outside, 2 shadowy figures have sinister plans. The woman reveals they've been pumping a special smoke into the room, a substance designed to cloud the mind and senses. Believing Seo-ah is a girl with no background, they see her as an easy prize. The woman gives a final order: go in and train her. Back in the room, a strange scent fills the air. Seo-ah stirs, a wave of sickness washing over her as she realizes her paradise is a trap. Seo-ah's mind fades as the smoke takes over. She tries to fight, knowing she has to get out, but her body gives up and she collapses onto the floor. Two shadowy figures step into the room, looming over her. One man is stunned by her appearance, but the other urges him to stop staring. He orders his partner to use another substance while she's in this weakened state. The man smirks, deciding to put some effort into her training. But as he reaches for her, a blur of motion sends him flying with a hard kick. Despite the smoke, Seo-ah fights back with surprising strength, shocking her attacker. The man curses, confused why she isn't completely weakened. One of them forces a strange substance on her, satisfied as her resistance fades. But as her consciousness slips, Seo-ah desperately thinks of her master and grandfather. She refuses to give up, and just as she's about to pass out, a mysterious energy bursts from within her. The attackers freeze, stunned by the new arrival. In her daze, Seo-ah's mind is flooded with a chilling vision of a man with piercing blue eyes. A premonition washes over her as a voice declares a wolf is coming. This wolf, she understands, is the one who will end her attacker, and he's also the one who will end her. The vision fades, but the fear remains. The blue-eyed wolf isn't just a nightmare. He's standing right there in the room, an imposing figure of absolute authority. Marquis Reinhardt calmly suggested the intruder was in the wrong room. The man sneered back, saying the one who came to the wrong room should be the one to leave. In a flash, Reinhardt's patience ran out. He didn't bother with words, instead overpowering the man with shocking speed and leaving him a mess on the floor. With cold, glowing purple eyes, Reinhardt lamented that no one ever understood him. He planted his foot firmly on the man's chest as two onlookers watched the scene unfold, frozen in terror. The room is an absolute mess. The attackers are sprawled on the floor, completely neutralized. In the middle of it all, a weakened Seo-ah looks up to see an imposing figure standing over the scene, Marquis Reinhardt. He surveys the aftermath with a chillingly indifferent gaze. One of his subordinates notes that Seo-ah has finally passed out. Another steps forward, addressing the Marquis as Your Excellency. He announces they have brought the owner of the establishment, and a terrified woman is forced to kneel before the powerful noble. She slowly looks up, her face pale with terror as she meets the gaze of Marquis Reinhardt. He stands over the defeated thugs, a chilling smirk on his face and absolute power radiating from him. With a glance toward the unconscious Seo-ah, he notes her presence. He then grabs one of the downed attackers by the hair, effortlessly hoisting his head up for a better look. He then gets to the real point, demanding to know what she gave Seo-ah. She stammers, admitting she gave the girl a substance to keep her from moving. This was the worst possible answer. The man's expression darkens instantly, signaling that her fate is sealed. Marquis Reinhardt lets out a puff of smoke, his eyes glowing with contempt. He sneers at the terrified owner, stating the substance only heightened Seo-ah's senses. He mocks her for her useless actions, coldly informing her that she should have known her place. All the woman can do is whimper an apology for her failure. Later, in a secure room, Seo-ah rests peacefully. A subordinate reports that the effects will wear off by morning. There will be no problem when she awakens, he concludes ominously, if she awakens safely. As Seo-ah rests, one of Simon's men reports that he has secured her key and identification. Simon orders them to create replicas and switch them with the originals as soon as possible. After giving his orders, he quietly approaches the bed, his hand gently brushing her shoulder. He then turns and signals for his men to follow him out of the room. As Simon leaves Seo-ah's side, he decides it's not right to leave her with those men. He steps into another room and comes face to face with Marquis Reinhardt, who looks imposing in just a simple robe. The Marquis wastes no time, immediately demanding to know the woman's name. Simon reports that her identification is indecipherable and currently held by the bank. Unimpressed, the Marquis orders him to get it figured out within a week and to keep the bank under surveillance. After Simon agrees, he asks about the King of Phelps status. After dismissing Simon, Marquis Reinhardt is left alone with his thoughts. He had assumed the key belonged to someone powerful, a major player at the top of the chain. He slowly approaches the bed where the woman rests. To think the owner was just someone like her. He stands over Seo-ah's sleeping form, completely baffled and speechless. Her eyes are clouded from the substance, with no hint of awareness. The Marquis is stunned that this unassuming woman is somehow at the center of everything, holding the key to this entire operation. Marquis Reinhardt studies the woman in bed, seeing her as nothing more than a frail, faint sketch. She seems impossibly small. Suddenly, Seo-ah begins to groan, her face flushed and slick with sweat as she tosses in discomfort. The Marquis turns away with a sigh, disgusted. He thinks about the potency of the substance, how just a drop could bring a person to this state. Deciding that's enough, he questions why he even bothered watching. There was no point in observing a delirious woman any longer. Just as he's about to walk away, a sudden twitch from the bed stops him cold. The Marquis turns back, shocked. Seo-ah is biting down hard, drawing blood, trying to fight the substance's influence even in her unconscious state. Her sheer willpower is astonishing. Without a second thought, he lunges forward, determined to intervene. A single tear streams down her face as he takes control of the situation. The Marquis looms over Seo-ah, his hand gripping her face to stop her struggles. A single tear traces a path down her cheek, a sign of her silent battle. Leaning in, his voice is a low command, ordering her to relax and loosen up. His authority is absolute, and with her trapped in a haze, there is no room for defiance. She is completely at his mercy now. As Seo-ah's body instinctively tries to pull away, Marquis Reinhardt easily overpowers her. He looms over her, questioning if she is truly resisting him when she looks so fragile. He finds it fascinating that while her eyes are as empty as a hollow shell, her body continues to fight back with a desperate instinct. He sees a woman with vigilance ingrained in her very being. Deciding to put an end to her struggle, he presses his thumb to her lips, asserting his complete control over the situation and silencing her defiance. The Marquis smirks, noting her incredible stubbornness. Even in her weakened state, she continues to defy him. He leans in close, his voice a cold whisper, warning her that such recklessness could be fatal. He makes one thing crystal clear: her life is not hers to throw away. He will not allow her to find an easy escape on her own terms. Having asserted his absolute control over the situation, he finally stands. With his point made, he turns and leaves the room, shutting the door on her muffled struggles. Back in his quarters, Marquis Reinhardt lets out a heavy sigh, the intense confrontation having clearly taken a toll. He sits down, but his solitude is brief as the door clicks open. His aide, Simon, enters the room, announcing that he arrived as summoned. Wasting no time on pleasantries, the Marquis immediately asks about the investigation he ordered. Simon confirms everything is proceeding as planned. He reports that a doctor is on the way and that he has already placed personnel at the bank, covering all the important details. Simon hands over his report, confirming Seo-ah's nationality. She originates from Dangak, a monarchy located near the Ryoher Empire. The Marquis mentions that she looked to be of mixed race, an observation Simon agrees with, though he adds that nothing is certain yet. Hearing this, the Marquis's expression hardens. With chilling intensity, he calls Simon's name. As his aide responds, the Marquis's hand tightens, crumpling the document he holds. Her mysterious background is clearly getting under his skin, and he needs answers now. The Marquis cuts to the chase, demanding to know how Seo-ah could possibly have a key. The aide's report takes them back to a man named Peter, who was supposedly swept away in a brutal storm at sea. But the Marquis is clearly not convinced by this story. With a dangerous edge to his voice, he asks if Peter is truly gone, or if the masterless key somehow just drifted into Seo-ah's possession. Simon can only state the official report. Peter was presumed lost along with the key, and there have been no updates since. The Marquis's thoughts drift to a specific file from 3 years ago, Report 2021. Simon reveals the author was Teresa Wittgenstein, an intelligence agent for the former Marquis, a woman whose skills were legendary. Her name hangs in the air, a ghost from the past. The Marquis's eyes narrow as he asks if there has been any word from her. With cold resolve, the Marquis gives a new order: find out where Teresa is right now. As Seo-ah sleeps, the Marquis stands in the doorway, his mind on fire with questions. He thought a certain old grudge was dead and buried, a ghost from his past. But seeing her right in front of him brings all those intense feelings roaring back. His gaze hardens with resolve. He realizes this mystery goes far beyond a simple investigation. This is now deeply personal, and a written report will never be enough to settle it. A terrifying memory flashes through Seo-ah's mind. It's a vision of fire and panic, filled with desperate screams for water and cries for help. In the heart of the chaos, a much younger Seo-ah sits alone, trapped. The room shudders as the inferno rages just outside. Suddenly, a door creaks open, spilling a blinding, fiery light into the darkness. A woman's silhouette appears in the doorway, standing against the blaze. Young Seo-ah looks up, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and terror. The woman's voice cuts through the fiery nightmare, commanding young Seo-ah to wake up. She orders the terrified girl to come outside and witness the terrible truth about her so-called father. He was the one who burned their home, Hoyeonjae, to the ground and brought ruin to the entire household staff. With a voice breaking from pure rage and grief, the woman screams the ultimate sin. Seo-ah's father had desecrated the grave of the very grandfather who had shown her kindness, stealing his remains and leaving nothing behind. The woman's voice drips with contempt, noting that Seo-ah isn't even surprised. She realizes the girl already knew everything. She knew this woman wasn't her mother, and that the man she called father was secretly her grandfather. The woman's fury finally explodes. She screams, demanding to know if Seo-ah also knew what that monster did to her own daughter. Trembling with guilt and terror, young Seo-ah can only stammer a broken apology as the memory of the burning estate crashes down on her. The woman's voice cut through the chaos, her eyes blazing with raw fury. She screamed a final command at the terrified Seo-ah: find her father, find that man, and bring her grandfather back. With those words seared into her mind, Seo-ah ran. She fled through flames and ash darker than the night itself, running endlessly into the inferno. The cries of countless people seemed to cling to her ankles, while the memory of the woman's sharp glare felt like a constant, agonizing weight on her back. Even as memories of despair and the sight of her dying master threatened to swallow her whole, she endured. Now, waking is a chaotic mess. Seo-ah's ears are ringing, and frantic voices argue over her. One person pleads, begging for someone to wait, insisting she'll wake up. But a cold, dismissive voice cuts in, questioning what difference it makes. As Seo-ah drifts back to consciousness, a man barks at her to stay still. The only answer is her own raw, agonized scream. Seo-ah understands the situation is serious, but her body won't respond. A voice cuts through the haze, a woman's desperate pleas, twisted with the memory of a cheerful greeter from some notorious establishment. The jarring thoughts send her spiraling. Her mind plunges into darkness, and pure terror grips her as she clutches the sheets. Feeling utterly alone, she silently begs for someone, anyone, to save her. Suddenly, a blinding light cuts through the void. A mysterious man with piercing eyes appears before her, and she can only wonder who he is. Seo-ah's eyes flutter open to the sound of urgent voices. As one man pleads with a senior to wait, a blond man named Simon coldly observes that she seems to be awake. Confused and weak, Seo-ah wonders where she is. Suddenly, a woman rushes to her bedside, apologizing profusely with relief in her eyes. But Simon is unmoved. He dismisses her, stating she is no longer needed and can leave now. He then orders a subordinate to inform His Excellency. As the room empties, Seo-ah sits up, clutching her pounding head in a daze. A voice cuts through her daze, asking if she's conscious. Seo-ah looks up to see Simon, the blond man, looming over her bed. He coldly questions if she thinks she can walk, but she is too stunned to reply. Without waiting for an answer, he commands her to change clothes and follow him. Before she can fully grasp the situation, her fate is already decided. Moments later, dressed in new clothes, she is silently led down a grand corridor by Simon and his group of intimidating men in suits. As Seo-ah is led down the corridor, she realizes her life is completely out of her control, hanging by a thread. But she isn't afraid. She has always believed her existence was a sin, so the end doesn't scare her. Her true terror is failing her grandfather, dying without meaning and without bringing him home. Lost in her somber thoughts, she suddenly stops in her tracks. Simon and the guards halt as well, turning as a massive set of doors slowly creaks open right in front of them. Seo-ah is ushered into a grand, sunlit room where an imposing man stands with his back to them. Overwhelmed by the sheer authority in the air, she keeps her head bowed low, feeling as if she can't even look up. A smooth voice cuts through the silence, ordering her not to stay like that and to look at him. Hesitantly, she raises her gaze and meets a pair of mesmerizing purple eyes. The man, Marquis Reinhardt, smiles down at her, his intense expression completely unreadable as he takes in her appearance. A spy's report reveals Seo-ah's identification card is from Dengek, a small eastern country, creating a bureaucratic nightmare. Simon informs the Marquis that opening the vault could take up to 2 years. The Marquis, finding this unacceptable, declares the wait is too long and demands a faster way. Simon calmly replies that there is one option, a single, lawful alternative to cut through the red tape and speed things up significantly. Simon drops a bombshell with a single word: marriage. The Marquis can barely believe it. Simon calmly lays out the plan. Marrying Seo-ah to someone with a clear identity would instantly solve their verification problem. As her legal spouse, her new husband could then access the vault for her. The Marquis, ever the strategist, immediately asks about the downside. Simon admits the biggest risk is Seo-ah herself. She's a complete unknown. They have no idea if she'll accept, and if she claims the marriage was forced, their whole plan will collapse. The Marquis considers his options. The key to everything he wants is right there, and he was expected to wait years with his hands tied. But now, with Seo-ah in his possession, there's no need to rush. He can take his time figuring out how to handle her. She's still standing meekly before him, a pawn in his game. With a confident smile spreading across his face, he commands her attention. He tells her that instead of looking down at the floor, she should be looking at him. Seo-ah lifts her head, her eyes finally meeting the Marquis' intense gaze. Mustering her strength, she stammers out her thanks, telling him she appreciates him for saving her. She then offers a deep, respectful bow. The Marquis is unimpressed, thinking she seems completely out of it. He turns to his men and requests a quick private conversation. Without waiting, he issues a sharp command to Seo-ah, telling her to follow him. Startled but obedient, she scrambles to keep pace as he strides purposefully down the hall. The Marquis leads Seo-ah into a private room, the chair scraping against the floor as she nervously takes a seat. In an attempt to ease the tension, he offers her something to drink. Too timid to choose, she quietly says anything is fine. He decides for her, pouring a refreshing soda and handing her the glass. She accepts it with a slight bow, her gratitude mixed with obvious anxiety. The Marquis observes her, a faint smirk playing on his lips as he notes how nervous she is. He tells her to relax and drink. Seo-ah sips her drink, determined to be polite. The Marquis gets straight to business, asking what she can remember. She admits her memory cuts off after she was by the riverbank. A sly grin spreads across his face as he cryptically asks if her tongue hurts. The strange question confuses her, but she realizes with a jolt that it does. A cold dread washes over her, what happened while she was unconscious. Before she can spiral, he smoothly changes the subject, demanding her name. Startled, she replies that she is Seo-ah. She confirms her name is Seo-ah. Internally, she's on high alert. His powerful presence feels like being near a wild beast. He repeats her name slowly, a smirk on his face as he notes its foreign sound. Gathering all her courage, Seo-ah timidly asks for his name in return. He takes a slow sip from his glass, his purple eyes fixed on her. He introduces himself simply as Oscar, before adding his full title, Oscar von Reinhardt.
Seo-ah freeze.
Her heart hammers in her chest. It was him all along, just as she'd suspected. Her mind flashes back to a warning she once received. A wolf would come looking for her. Now, faced with this powerful man, a strange wave of relief washes over her. She's glad he found her. Oscar breaks the silence, reminding her that she thanked him earlier for the rescue. The atmosphere instantly shifts. He looms over her, declaring it's time to collect his payment. But then, with a sly grin, he sits back down. His price isn't money. He just wants her to answer a few questions honestly. Oscar drops a bombshell, revealing he knows she's from a distant land called Dangak. Not only that, but he also knows she was carrying the key to the Phelp bank vault. He leans in, his gaze intense, demanding to know how she got here and how she came to possess such an important item. Seo-ah is floored. How could he know all that? Her mind races for a believable lie. She can't admit she's seeking revenge and searching for her father. Thinking fast, she blurts out the only plausible excuse she can think of: money. Oscar processes her flimsy excuse, a disbelieving smirk creeping onto his face. He asks if she really just needs money. Visibly nervous, Seo-ah timidly asks if that's a strange reason. The Marquis lets out a dramatic sigh, but he can't hide the amused glint in his eyes. Internally, he finds this incredibly convenient. If it's just about money, then things are about to get a whole lot simpler. He rises from his chair, his mind made up. No matter her answer, he had no intention of ever letting her go. Oscar watches Seo-ah as she pores over the contract. He finds himself intrigued. Her clothes are over 20 years old, yet her posture is perfectly straight, and she holds the paper with a certain elegance. She avoids his gaze, but it's obvious she was raised in a noble environment. He guesses she might be an illegitimate child, someone who grew up constantly walking on eggshells. Breaking the silence, he suddenly asks for her opinion on the contract, causing her to flinch in surprise. Hesitantly, Seo-ah asks about the 500 million Kurdi mentioned in the contract, wanting to know its actual value. Oscar smirks, explaining that a decent mansion in the capital costs about 10 billion. The sheer scale of the wealth leaves Seo-ah utterly speechless. Misreading her shock as disappointment, Oscar asks if the amount isn't enough, offering to add more. Flustered, she quickly insists it's more than enough. Satisfied with her answer, he smoothly moves to finalize the deal, asking if they should sign now, catching her completely off guard. Oscar slides a sleek fountain pen across the table to seal the deal. Seo-ah carefully picks it up with both hands, but she fumbles, unsure how to open it. Amused, Oscar asks if it's her first time seeing such a pen. She timidly admits she's only ever used old-fashioned dip pens. As she struggles with the cap, terrified of breaking it, Oscar smirks. He tells her to just pull it off, casually mentioning that with 500 million a week, she could break one and just throw it away. The casual remark about her immense new wealth leaves her completely stunned. Finally getting a grip, Seo-ah readies herself to sign the contract. But as she scans the paper, Oscar suddenly looms over her from behind, his presence overwhelming. He leans in close, his voice a low rumble right by her ear, asking if she's just writing Seo-ah. He questions the name, thinking it should be longer. Flustered by his proximity, she quietly explains that her surname is Han. A subtle smirk plays on Oscar's lips as he slowly repeats her full name, Han, Seo-ah, as if tasting the words. The intensity in his gaze leaves her completely frozen. With a steady hand, Seo-ah signs her name, sealing the deal as Oscar's piercing gaze watches her every move. The moment she's done, he straightens up, his tone cold and detached. He announces a servant will handle the contract and casually tells her to keep the ridiculously expensive pen. Without a backward glance, he walks out, joining his men waiting by the door. As they disappear down the hall, Seo-ah is left alone in the vast room, completely stunned by the life-altering decision she just made, barely able to utter a sound. Without a single backward glance, Oscar turns and walks away. His men fall and step behind him, their footsteps echoing down the grand hallway until they disappear from sight. Seo-ah is left standing alone, a small figure in the enormous, silent room. The deal is done, her life forever changed. As she stares at the empty doorway, a quiet, desperate question forms in her mind. When would he return? The immense weight of her new reality begins to crash down on her, leaving her feeling completely isolated. Left alone, Seo-ah finally processed her new reality. She had signed a contract, trading her life for money and what Oscar called protection. Meanwhile, in the Grand Palace of Felp, things are getting heated. Grand Duke Baden is absolutely fuming, screaming about Marquis Reinhardt's audacity. The Marquis is late to a meeting personally called by King Henry IV himself. Baden rages that this is a total slap in the face to the entire kingdom and demands they protest to the King of Luxon. This only makes Baden angrier, escalating his claims until the king's patience snaps, his fist crashing down on the throne. The king finally snaps, calling the duke foolish for only now realizing Marquis Reinhardt looks down on him. King Henry coldly reveals he knew all along that the Marquis influenced Baden's appointment as bank president. As Baden stammers, insisting his promotion was based on merit, a guard announces the arrival of the man himself. Marquis Reinhardt has entered the building. King Henry, done with the drama, orders the guards to let him in. The grand throne room doors swing open, and Marquis Reinhardt makes his entrance. His confident footsteps echo through the massive hall as he strolls past a sweating Grand Duke Baden. Reinhardt stops before the king, places a hand over his heart, and offers a formal greeting to his majesty. A faint, unreadable smile touches the king's lips as he finally welcomes the powerful Marquis who caused all this trouble. Marquis Reinhardt offers a polite greeting to the King of Felp. But King Henry isn't fooled by the man's handsome face. He sees the youthful charm for what it is, a dangerous lure to make people drop their guard. Before the king can respond, Grand Duke Baden explodes, screaming at Reinhardt for his insolence and disrespect. Unbothered by the outburst, the Marquis calmly states that the summons was unexpected and he arrived as quickly as possible, completely dismissing the duke's furious tantrum with his cool composure. The king cuts straight to the chase. He heard about an incident and asks Reinhardt point-blank, did he pour liquor down the Grand Duke's throat? With a cool demeanor, Reinhardt simply states that the duke did drink quite a lot. This evasive answer sends Baden into a rage. He screams that Reinhardt held his mouth shut and forced the drink in himself, calling it an attempted assassination. But the Marquis merely scoffs, turning to the fuming duke and calmly questioning the ridiculous accusation. Reinhardt doesn't even deny it. Instead, he calmly asks why he would do that. He then twists the knife, suggesting that even if he did, there must have been a good reason for it. He says every action has a motive, a chilling statement that makes the duke's blood run cold. A flashback hits Baden hard. He remembers Reinhardt's predatory eyes, like a wolf cornering its prey. The raw fear from that memory overwhelms him, and the Grand Duke stumbles backward, crashing to the floor right in front of the king's throne. The Grand Duke lies broken on the floor, completely defeated by sheer terror. Seeing this pathetic display, the furious king orders his guards to drag the man away at once. As the duke is hauled out, the king confronts Reinhardt directly. He states he knows the Marquis wants access to the Felp Bank's vaults and installed the duke as governor for that very reason. Unintimidated, the king declares that no matter what, the bank will operate strictly by the book. Reinhardt calmly replies that he understands perfectly, his easy agreement more menacing than any threat. Reinhardt offers his sincerest apologies for the recent trouble. He places a folder on the table, promising the king there will be no more cause for worry. When the king asks what it is, Reinhardt calls it a token of his apology. The king sternly refuses the gift and orders him to take it away. Unbothered, the Marquis calmly suggests he burn it then. With a smirk, he tells the king to just think of it as something delivered by a crow that will never know if the document is read or destroyed. As Reinhardt leaves, he knows the king is trapped. The folder he left behind contains a full record of all of Grand Duke Baden's dirty deeds, giving the king the perfect excuse to get rid of the man. But Reinhardt's true goal is far more ruthless. He coldly reflects that he has no reason to let a man who betrayed him live. After all, a secret is safest when there's no one left alive to tell it. As Marquis Reinhardt left the palace, his aide Simon hurried to catch up, eager to know how the king reacted. With a confident smirk, Reinhardt simply asked what Simon thought. While his aide listed the day's busy schedule, the Marquis cut him off to ask about the men they had captured. Simon grimly reported that the prisoners still hadn't talked. The questioning had been severe, and most of them had already lost consciousness from the strain, proving just how ruthless Reinhardt's methods for extracting information could be. But the Marquis was already one step ahead, having planted his own spies inside their ranks. Since their prisoner was connected to them, Reinhardt decided a personal visit was in order. As he headed for his carriage, Simon caught up to him. He cautiously brought up the woman they had discussed earlier, asking if she had gone to the Felt Bank. Simon reported that Seo-ah hadn't gone to the bank just yet. She was currently at a shop buying some necessities before she planned to head over. Reinhardt recalled her worn-out clothes as he asked for any other reports. Simon added that Seo-ah had been completely silent since he left. She had only spoken once, asking the staff a single question. Was he planning on returning? The unexpected question caught the Marquis by surprise. A slow, amused smirk spread across his face as he processed her words. Marquis Reinhardt found her question surprisingly bold. For a woman who seemed so timid, asking about his return was unexpected, and he briefly wondered why she cared. Shaking the thought aside, he refocused on business, asking Simon about a man named Abel. His aide confirmed that Abel was preparing and had already been briefed on the details of his mission. In a luxurious room elsewhere, the handsome, blonde-haired Abel looked up from his papers. A sly smirk crossed his face as he mused aloud, asking if he had a new target. The Reinhardt family's true power lies with its elite agents, known simply as the Wolves. They started as private soldiers, but evolved as their missions became darker. They mastered espionage, disruption, and the permanent removal of threats, transforming from knights into shadows. After a bitter betrayal by the King of Luxon, their allegiance became absolute. They serve only Reinhardt himself, not a country or a crown. Most believe the Wolves are a myth, but a select few, including Simon, operate in the open, their heavy footsteps echoing with unspoken purpose. Deep within a hidden chamber, the steady rhythm of footsteps cut through the silence. A group of men in sharp suits had cornered their target. The man knelt on the cold stone floor, clearly having endured a brutal ordeal, his hands bound tightly behind him. Marquis Reinhardt emerged from the shadows, his purple eyes taking in the scene. This was the only one left. He slowly pulled on his black gloves, his mind zeroing in on a single, critical question. He demanded to know the identity of the secret collaborator within the Ruxin royal palace. Reinhardt's purple eyes glowed as he posed a chilling riddle, asking about someone who sees the world with closed eyes. The captive's face was a mask of terror. He stammered and begged for his life, but Reinhardt was out of patience. His gloved hand tightened, and the man's strength finally gave out, his body slumping to the floor. Deciding he was done, Reinhardt coldly ordered his men to dispose of him. With his last breath, the captive choked out that he was just a soldier following orders from the Beta Mercenary Corps. Reinhardt simply stated that he already knew that. The captive's last plea was cut short as his body finally went limp on the cold stone. For the Wolves, this was just business. They moved with disciplined precision, their faces void of any emotion. Their loyalty is absolute and blind. Those who fail to devote themselves to the master who raised them are simply discarded. Simon walked away without a backward glance, his mission complete as a new chapter began. Marquis Reinhardt's carriage pulled up to a magnificent estate under the moonlight. His men greeted him formally, announcing his arrival with respect. As he strode through the opulent halls, a familiar figure waited in the wings. It was Simon, the blonde wolf, who offered a polite greeting to his master. But Reinhardt stopped in his tracks, his sharp purple eyes locking onto his subordinate. He silently demanded to know why his right-hand man was there waiting for him, his expression filled with unspoken questions. Inside a grand room, Oscar von Reinhardt suddenly stopped, sensing a presence nearby. He initially tensed, wondering if another assassin had managed to slip past his defenses. The door creaked open, and Seo-ah appeared, her hands clasped nervously. She quietly asked if he had returned. A slight smile touched Oscar's lips. He told her he'd heard her coming in, before asking if she had been well and if she made it to the bank. Seo-ah confirmed she went to the bank, explaining that accessing the vault would take half a year due to document verification. She then shyly thanked Oscar for her new clothes. A rare, genuine smile touched his lips as he told her she looked nice. But then his expression shifted, and he asked her to turn around for him. He calmly explained he wanted to see if the dress truly suited her. Flustered by the unexpected attention, she reluctantly agreed, her heart pounding as she slowly twirled under his intense, unreadable gaze. A faint smirk appeared on Oscar's face as he questioned if her awkward walk was what she called turning around. Blushing, Seo-ah stammered that he was the one who told her to do it. He stepped closer, explaining he just meant for her to spin in place, not walk a whole circle. Deciding that was enough, he told her to go inside. He then informed her they were leaving for Luxon early the next morning and warned her not to oversleep. After she meekly agreed, he bid her good night and left the room. In a private room, a blonde man named Simon asked his superior if the woman who just left was their new target. The dark-haired Marquis confirmed she was. As Seo-ah walked away, unaware, the Marquis dropped a bombshell. She was Simon's marriage target. He offered Simon a deal, succeed, and his reputation as a gold digger would be erased. Smirking, Simon simply asked if all he had to do was make her want to marry him. The Marquis then revealed they had already duplicated her vault key, securing the original for themselves. The Marquis laid out the final plan. The cleanest method was for Simon to marry Seo-ah and inherit full ownership of her vault key. He gave Simon free rein, permitting him to get emotionally involved first, as long as there were no messy side effects. A confident smirk played on Simon's lips as he considered the innocent woman. He then looked up, his eyes gleaming with ambition. Placing a hand over his heart, he made a bold promise, requesting exactly 1 month to complete his mission and make Seo-ah his. The next morning, Seo-ah stood ready with her luggage. Oscar, flanked by his men, was already waiting and seemed surprised she was on time. After she wished him a good morning, he laid out the travel plans, breakfast on the train, arriving in Luxon by noon. But there was a catch. He introduced a new face, a handsome blonde man who would be her personal escort from now on. Stepping forward with a charming smile, Simon, her secret suitor, wished the unsuspecting Seo-ah a good morning, putting their devious plan into motion. The charming blonde escort introduced himself as Abel Sting, but we all know he's really Simon, the man on a mission. A slightly flustered Seo-ah quietly greeted him. Turning up the charm, Simon immediately offered to take her luggage. She politely refused, insisting she could handle it herself, but he gently insisted. As he walked ahead with her bag, Oscar commented that this was all new for her. Hearing this, a confident smirk spread across Simon's face. His mission to win her over had officially begun. As Marquis Reinhardt watched her go, a small smile formed on his lips. He thought to himself that she never failed to defy his expectations. His influence stemmed from the Reinhardt Wolves, an organization that started as border guards but evolved into a special missions force. With specialized divisions for combat, intelligence, and espionage, they were a powerful tool. Back on the train, Simon approached the seated Seo-ah. Within the spy team existed an even more specialized unit, the beautiful and cunning agents, known as the Flower Snakes. On the train, Simon immediately began his charm offensive. Leaning back, he asked Seo-ah if she was hot, suggesting she remove a few layers. Watching from a distance, 2 of Reinhardt's other agents grumbled. One complained that Simon had it easy, getting paid the same as them just for flashing his pretty face. His partner shut him down, pointing out they could never replicate Simon's unique, greasy charm. This was his specialty. A master of his craft, Simon could ensnare any target, making even the most devoted wives fall completely under his spell. Simon unleashed his ultimate weapon, his captivating gaze, a trick guaranteed to make any woman swoon. This was his special talent. He waited for the inevitable question, the one that meant his target was snared. But Seo-ah didn't take the bait. Instead, she calmly asked if she should close the curtains. She casually remarked that he looked hotter than her and blamed the blinding sun. Before a stunned Simon could react, she shut the curtains, leaving him in the dark as his fellow agents erupted in laughter. His perfect plan had completely backfired. Marquis Reinhardt reviewed a report, a smirk playing on his lips. He mused that Seo-ah wasn't as easy as he'd anticipated, but felt it was only a matter of time. On the train, Seo-ah peeked through the curtains, feeling a sense of ease as she admired the stunning new scenery. She was glad Simon had finally buttoned his shirt, as she hadn't known where to look before. Blushing, she recalled a mistake from yesterday when she'd completely misunderstood a command and literally spun around. She was determined not to repeat such an error. An aide rushed in to deliver an urgent report to Marquis Reinhardt concerning his intelligence team. At that very moment, the train carrying Seo-ah screeched to a violent stop, jolting everyone inside. Confused, she wondered what was happening. One of Reinhardt's men moved instantly, grabbing a stunned Simon by the back of his jacket. But the real shock came when the carriage door slid open. A powerful figure stood silhouetted in the entrance. Seo-ah looked up in disbelief, recognizing the imposing man before her and addressing him as Your Excellency. The imposing man with piercing purple eyes gave a single, cold command. Seo-ah was to follow him. Before she could even process it, he turned and left the carriage with his men. Flustered, Seo-ah watched him go, wondering if he was coming back. Simon, looking completely unbothered, told her not to worry. The Marquis just had urgent business. This didn't comfort Seo-ah, who then worriedly asked what was supposed to happen to her. Looking at her as if it were obvious, Simon clarified that their destination hadn't changed. They were going to the Reinhardt estate. Seo-ah quietly accepted her fate, muttering that she was indeed going to the Reinhardt estate. She tried her best to swallow the anxiety that bubbled up with every small change. Alone in the carriage, her mind raced. She wondered when the Marquis would finally arrive and worried that he planned to lock her away somewhere. Outside on the platform, Simon took a long drag from his cigarette. He steeled his resolve, believing this was the only path he could possibly take. He had no other choice. Seo-ah fought to still her anxious heart, recalling Simon's assurance that it was just urgent business. Meanwhile, in a dark forest, that very business was concluding. Marquis Reinhardt's men moved with lethal efficiency through the brush, having already secured their target. The rescued agent looked shaken but was alive. Observing the operation's success, the Marquis watched with cold satisfaction, a cigarette held loosely between his lips. His little errand was over. The train could now proceed to his estate. In the dark woods, Marquis Reinhardt received his report. He coldly asked if they had caught everyone, and his subordinate confirmed the mission's success. However, the news was grim. The agent explained that while the search party had recovered their fallen comrades, the team leader had been captured alive, his location unknown. The Marquis took a long drag from his cigarette and asked about the man's chances. Looking down, the agent admitted they were now simply searching to recover the leader's remains. The mission had come at a high cost. The agent clenched his fist, delivering the grim news. Every single operative they sent had been discovered. A bitter smile touched Marquis Reinhardt's lips as he realized he'd been played, dancing in the palm of some unknown enemy. When his men asked for orders, his response was swift and merciless. He commanded them to discard all the intel they had gathered. Then came the gut punch. They were to abandon the search for their 2 captured comrades. His men could only stare in shock, knowing they had to follow his command, no matter the cost. Marquis Reinhardt knew it was pointless to search for his men now. He realized the king had not only taken down his agents, but had done so with brutal efficiency. If he couldn't figure out the king's secret plans, he would simply remove the hand doing the plotting. 5 days later, his new orders were given with chilling calm. He commanded his men to bring him the beta mercenary leader. Since that man had gotten his hands dirty, the Marquis decided he wouldn't be needing them any longer. Meanwhile, Seo-ah's carriage rolled through the magnificent streets of Ise, the capital of Luxon. Peering out the window, she was captivated by a massive statue towering over the central plaza. She silently wondered if the grand figure was a legendary hero, or perhaps the king himself. But her companion, Simon, quietly corrected her. The man immortalized in stone was none other than the late Marquis, a name that hung heavy in the air as they continued their journey into the heart of the city. Simon clarified that the man immortalized in stone was Marquis Reinhardt's father. The revelation hit Seo-ah as she noticed the striking resemblance. The late Marquis had the same intense, brooding gaze as his son. Thinking she was looking at their family estate, she pointed to the grand building behind the statue. But Simon shook his head. That wasn't the Reinhardt mansion. It was the royal palace itself. The message was clear. The hero who saved the nation stood guard, a constant reminder that their power overshadowed even the king. Inside the opulent royal palace, Count Jerome nervously addressed King Henry IV. The king, staring out the window, coldly asked if they had seen the news. Every paper in the nation was singing the praises of Reinhardt steel, hailing it as the kingdom's new pillar. With a bitter scoff, the king remarked that they should just rename the country Reinhardt at this point. His anger exploded as he slammed his fist on the desk, startling his attendants. Whirling around with a furious expression, he roared at them, demanding to know how Reinhardt's influence had grown so unchecked. Grand Duke Baden cornered his subordinate, who could only apologize for his utter failure. The Duke was livid, reminding him of his promise to eliminate Marquis Reinhardt. But the mission was a complete disaster. Not only was the Marquis still breathing, but every assassin sent after him was now gone. With a cruel smirk, the Duke questioned if the man was too afraid of Reinhardt's powerful mother to finish the job. His rage boiled over as he screamed that to take control of the steel company, the Marquis had to be dealt with, and soon. King Henry IV demanded an update from Oscar von Reinhardt about the 2 captured assassins, wanting to know if they had cracked. Oscar reported that getting information was likely impossible. These men were the type who would never betray their master, no matter the consequences. Enraged, the king listed off a series of brutal methods to make them talk. However, Oscar calmly advised against it, stating it would be a pointless waste of time that would only provoke their target. The king was left alone, haunted by his late father's warning. Never let a lone wolf grow to adulthood. He now regretted letting the Marquis become so powerful. A new schemer broods over his fatal mistake. He thought Marquis Reinhardt, with his ruined family, would just disappear. But that was a massive miscalculation. He never considered Reinhardt could rise so high as the royal family crumbled. Now, he's determined to take the steel company, and to do that, Reinhardt must be eliminated. Frustrated, he sips his wine. The assassination he ordered failed completely, and his spy couldn't get any intel from Grand Duke Baden. To make matters worse, a report comes in. Reinhardt has already met the king, and Baden is about to be fired. Furious, the schemer slams his wine glass down, calling his subordinate a fool. He demands to know where Marquis Reinhardt is now. An aide reports that the Marquis has left Philp and is on a train headed for the capital. However, there's a strange twist. The aide reveals Reinhardt is traveling with a mysterious woman who is definitely not a servant. This baffling news reaches another powerful lord, who is stunned. He questions why Oscar von Reinhardt, of all people, would be bringing a woman with him. The thought is almost unbelievable. As the carriage rolled through a lush, green forest, Seo-ah caught her first glimpse of the massive estate. Inside, the blonde-haired Simon smirked, clearly impressed with the lavish surroundings. Their transport finally pulled up to a mansion so grand it looked like a palace. Acting the part of a perfect gentleman, Simon stepped out and offered his hand, officially welcoming her to the Reinhardt mansion. But Seo-ah, looking overwhelmed, politely declined his help. She insisted she was fine on her own, leaving him watching her with a curious expression. Simon withdraws his hand, internally griping that Seo-ah is completely unapproachable. Awaiting them at the top of the grand staircase is a stern-looking woman in a crisp suit. She formally welcomes them to the Reinhardt mansion. Clutching her suitcase, a nervous Seo-ah quietly greets her back. The woman confirms she received word from the Marquis and that a room has been prepared for their guest. Without another word, she turns and leads them into the vast, shadowy halls of the imposing estate, the doors closing behind them. The stern woman leads Seo-ah on a tour, explaining the layout. She points out the main hall and the annex, coldly stating the annex is for servants and that Seo-ah has no reason to be there. She then lays down the rules. She will be in charge of Seo-ah's daily life, and an escort named Abel must accompany her everywhere outside. When asked for a name, the woman simply says to call her Mrs. Barbara. She then leads Seo-ah into the central hall, a space so enormous it leaves her speechless. As the tour continued, Mrs. Barbara pointed to a set of grand double doors. She gave Seo-ah a final, stern warning. Those were the Marquis' private quarters. Under no circumstances was she to enter without his explicit permission. Snapping back to attention, Seo-ah quickly agreed. Mrs. Barbara then led her to her assigned room, turning the knob and pushing the door open. But inside wasn't a bedroom. It was a colossal library. Seo-ah stared in disbelief, thinking that while the room was huge, it felt cold and wasn't a space meant for living. Mrs. Barbara reveals the library is actually the Marquis' private study. When Seo-ah spots another grand door and asks where it goes, the woman's answer is blunt. It's the Marquis' bedroom. A wave of shock hits Seo-ah. Mrs. Barbara issues a final, stern warning. She can read the books, but she must never enter the bedroom without explicit permission. A nervous Seo-ah quickly agrees. Satisfied, Mrs. Barbara shows her to her real room, an attached suite with a bathroom, explaining that meals will be brought to her there. Mrs. Barbara tells Seo-ah to get some rest and finally leaves the room. As the door closes, Seo-ah is left completely alone. She lets out a heavy sigh, the sheer grandeur of the mansion making her feel small and impossibly far from home. Her thoughts spiral back to the nerve-wracking journey. She remembers the ship, the constant anxiety of being pursued, and the awful night that changed everything. And at the center of it all was one man, a powerful figure who seemed carved from shadows, the one responsible for everything. Oscar. Alone in her new room, Seo-ah comes to a grim realization. She's going to be under constant surveillance. But at least she has some space to move around. She decides that as long as she can trust the contract she signed with Oscar, then that's enough. She has to push down the anxiety from her journey. Meanwhile, Simon storms up to Mrs. Barbara, demanding to know why Seo-ah wasn't placed in a room near his. The head maid's response is ice cold. She asks him if there was any place in the mansion better suited to both monitor and protect her. Mrs. Barbara stands her ground, her voice like ice. She declares that she prioritizes the Marquis' orders above all else, and his command was absolute. Seo-ah must not be lost. She grills Simon, questioning the wisdom of placing Seo-ah near him, given his notorious reputation. If anything went wrong, she warns, he would share the blame. With a sharp smirk, she mocks him, noting that he hasn't even managed to hold the girl's hand. Annoyed, Simon calls his approach a highly aesthetic task, but Barbara dismisses his excuse, telling him not to create a security risk. Fuming after his encounter with the head maid, Simon curses under his breath. He hates this job. He knows the others look down on him, doubting his ability to use his charms on their target. But a determined smirk plays on his lips. He resolves to show them all just how much Seo-ah can be made to cling to him. Elsewhere, the Marquis stands alone in his vast study, contemplating the nature of temptation. Based on his experience, he concludes physical desire almost always comes before emotional connection, knowing Seo-ah must feel terrified in this strange place. Simon visualizes his grand plan. He imagines showering the terrified Seo-ah with kind words and gentle gazes, convinced she'll become intoxicated by his charm. In his fantasy, she blushes and leans on him, seeing him as her only source of comfort in this strange place. Back in reality, Simon reflects on his awkward performance on the train. But now, he feels they have a cozy, private space. A sly smirk spreads across his face as he concludes he has the perfect opportunity to slowly and surely win her over. Simon reflects on his time-tested method. He recalls a past conquest, a woman distraught over a nobleman's corruption that her own count chose to ignore. This made her master an accomplice, and her powerlessness was heartbreaking. Simon moved in, offering gentle reassurances and feigning concern for her pain. She melted at his words, seeking solace in his arms and begging to forget reality. For Simon, this was a simple formula. He believed that physical closeness always led to emotional surrender. It was the game he always won. The head maid finds Simon lounging in the library, delivering his meal with a side of sarcasm. She questions if she should apologize for seeing him so exposed. He tells her to watch her mouth, but their tense exchange is cut short. Another servant announces that dinner for the lady is ready. Realizing Seo-ah has been quiet for hours, the maid and a suddenly concerned Simon go to her door. Despite the commotion they made, there was no answer. They open it to find their target simply curled up and fast asleep. The head maid tells Simon to keep his voice down, pointing out how peacefully Seo-ah is sleeping. Simon is completely dumbfounded. He can't comprehend how the woman who was trembling with fear earlier is now sleeping so soundly in a strange place. His elaborate plan is already going off the rails. The next morning, sunlight streams into the room. Seo-ah's eyes flutter open, and she sits up, taking in the opulent bedroom in utter disbelief. Seo-ah jolts awake, shocked to realize she slept through the entire night. A sharp knock sounds at her door before the head maid enters with a breakfast tray. The maid explains she let Seo-ah rest through dinner because she looked completely exhausted. Embarrassed, Seo-ah scrambles out of bed to help, but the woman calmly refuses her assistance. Placing the meal down, the maid informs Seo-ah that her wages are being kept safe in the office, and she can withdraw from them whenever she wishes. The head maid tells Seo-ah not to hesitate if she needs anything. After a quiet moment, Seo-ah timidly makes a request. She explains that she saw the beautiful city from the carriage and asks if she could possibly visit the marketplace. The maid thinks it over, her expression unreadable. Then, a small smile appears on her face. She assures Seo-ah it's no problem at all. The central market, the largest in Vies, is nearby and will be opening soon. Seo-ah is free to go and look around. The head maid tells Seo-ah to let her know when she's ready, promising to call an escort named Abel. But Seo-ah's guide turns out to be none other than a very grumpy Simon. He is absolutely fuming. As they walk through the crowded marketplace, he complains internally. While she slept like a log, he was up all night working. Now he's being forced to wander around a place he despises, all while being mistaken for a common merchant in his expensive clothes. This is a complete nightmare for him. The chaotic marketplace is a whirlwind of sights and sounds. As Seo-ah tries to take it all in, someone shoves past her, causing her to lose her footing. Before she can fall, Simon catches her arm. He tells her to be careful, remarking on the chaotic crowd. With a resigned sigh, he takes her hand, muttering that he still has a job to do. Blushing, Seo-ah asks if it's considered rude not to hold hands. Simon just laughs, explaining the road is simply rough. But she insists he doesn't need to worry about her. Simon complains to himself about being dragged out at dawn. He was sure Seo-ah would hate this chaotic marketplace, but he was completely wrong. He watches in surprise as she navigates the crowd with an eerie grace. She never stumbles on the rough ground and dodges carts as if she has eyes in the back of her head. Simon thinks that even a trained combat squad would be clumsier than her. Just as a vendor offers her a sample, Seo-ah whips a long, sharp needle out of her sleeve, her reflexes shockingly fast. The sausage vendor gets way too close, shoving a sample in Seo-ah's hand. He boasts that it's the best in town, and a total steal at 10,000 kurts. But Simon, who's been watching from the background, isn't buying it. He scoffs at the price, thinking the guy is a total scammer. Stepping forward, he calls out the vendor on the ridiculous cost. The man gets defensive, but Simon just plucks the sausage from Seo-ah's hand, a dangerous smirk on his face. The vendor starts sweating and quickly changes his story. With the vendor dealt with, Simon glares, thinking he won't let anyone rip off a stranger on his watch. But he's stopped in his tracks when Seo-ah turns to him. With a surprisingly warm smile, she genuinely thanks him. For a second, Simon is completely stunned. He realizes she actually can look someone in the eye, and he questions if this is the first time he's ever seen her smile. Regaining his composure, he just smirks and brushes it off, telling her it was nothing. Back at the Grand Mansion, the head maid gets a report from Seo-ah. The woman offers her more cash for her market trip tomorrow, but Seo-ah politely turns it down, saying she has enough. A stern-looking butler watches the exchange with a keen eye. He seems impressed by her answer, noting to himself that she certainly knows what she's doing. Having seen enough, he announces that he'll go prepare dinner and promptly leaves the room. A cart with her meal is wheeled in moments later. Two men watch from the sidelines as Simon lies face down on the table, completely exhausted. One of them observes that things clearly aren't going his way. It's not just him, either. The entire backup team looks totally drained of energy. Simon finally lifts his head and chugs a drink, letting out a frustrated sigh. He wonders what on earth Seo-ah is doing, questioning if he even managed to hold her hand. Just when he thought she was finally starting to relax and they were making progress, it all went wrong. At the market, an item catches Seo-ah's eye. The vendor tries to rip her off, quoting a steep price of 15,000 kurti. But the quiet girl suddenly grabs Simon's arm, declaring the price is ridiculous. She fearlessly haggles with the man, countering his every offer until he finally cracks and sells it for way less. After the deal is done, she politely thanks a bewildered Simon. It slowly dawns on him that he was just used as a prop. His fancy clothes made her look like someone important, helping her score a massive discount. Seo-ah hesitantly gets Simon's attention, causing him to snap out of his daze. He instantly puts on a dazzling smile and asks what she needs. She points to a quaint outdoor cafe, wondering if she's allowed to sit at the tables. Simon explains that she can if they order something, and then smoothly asks if she wants to go. She shyly agrees, and he celebrates internally. But his thoughts betray a dark future, lamenting that if he'd known it was a trap, he would have stopped her. Moments later, their coffee and dessert are served. Simon thought she'd just have a quick drink and leave. But 1 hour passed. Then another. And another. All this time, Seo-ah just sat there, calmly sipping her drink while the empty cups and dessert plates started piling up. Simon's initial confusion turned into sheer disbelief. He finally snapped, crumpling the ridiculously long receipt in his fist. Slumped over in defeat, he couldn't understand what was happening. Who on earth orders 6 cups of coffee in one sitting? This quiet girl was an absolute menace to his wallet and his sanity. Simon was completely baffled. He thought the girl was just clueless about how cafes worked, but he was wrong. She deliberately ordered a new coffee every hour just so she could keep her seat. Back in his room, he replayed the day's events. He'd been too annoyed to see it before, but she wasn't just a master haggler. She explored the market like it was a brand new world. It finally hit him, his looks and charm had absolutely no effect on her. Thrown for a loop, Simon decided he desperately needed a drink. Simon desperately prayed she would just stay home tomorrow. But while he was out having a much-needed drink, Seo-ah was already back at her desk, hard at work. She meticulously recorded everything she had learned, noting the high cost of supplies like notebooks and fountain pens. Her research on the main market districts was complete. Now she had a new list. Tomorrow, she planned to visit the 5 or 6 other markets that a certain Mrs. Barbara had recommended. Her mission was far from over. It was just beginning. After a long night of research, Seo-ah finally pushed back from her desk. The day's endless walking had left her legs throbbing with exhaustion. But physical pain was one thing. Her mind was a whole other problem. She couldn't relax. This place still felt so foreign, and she couldn't shake the unnerving feeling of being watched, even when no one was in sight. A man's displeased face flashed in her memory. He had looked so angry with her, and that unsettling image was stuck on a loop in her head. Seo-ah steeled her resolve. She felt she had no choice but to keep moving forward. To find the one fish he wanted in this vast, sprawling city, she knew she had to cast a line. And she would be the bait. He would surely recognize the stranger with the red hair ribbon. To make it easier for him, she planned to stay in crowded places. Even if her heart pounded and she wanted to run, she would endure it and wait. Looking up at the full moon, she silently hoped he would see her soon. Marquis Reinhardt stood alone under the brilliant full moon, a silent, imposing figure against the night sky. His quiet vigil was suddenly broken by the arrival of Simon and his entourage. Simon stepped forward, delivering the crucial update he'd been waiting for. The search team had finally made contact. A cold, knowing look settled on Reinhardt's face as he acknowledged the report. Without wasting another second, he turned to his men with grim purpose. It was time to go. The wait was finally over.